So I'm sure some of you have seen this court case that has been doing the rounds recently, which is basically where somebody who was doing some bonus bagging and some multi-accounting on Bet365 was basically sentenced to 5 years in prison. Well, that's how people positioned it, but in fact, as always, the detail behind it is a little bit different from the way that stuff gets sensationalized nowadays. Now, I saw this case and all of the press that went around it, so I thought I'd do a bit of digging to try and get a bit more information. And this video is really just to give you a more balanced view of exactly what has gone on with this court case. So when I became aware of this court case, I was also aware of something else, which is contempt of court. You can't speculate on a court case and put forward things that as fact, despite the fact that you have no evidence that they are fact. So I've sort of held off commenting on this case until about now, because there is a little bit more detail around exactly what happened, which I'm going to elaborate for you within this video, and I'm going to link you to the sources as well. So this isn't me speculating on the situation, this is actually linking to sources. So when I became aware of this particular case, I went on to the Crown Court where this case was being held to actually have a look at some of the detail behind there, because what I was really interested in is exactly what had happened, not what people were speculating on, but exactly what had happened. And you can actually see on the official page the defendant, the prosecutor, and the sentence, which was basically 5 years for false representation. But the interesting thing about this was actually a Crown Court, so this is a criminal case, and there's an important line to draw here straight away. And that is, say you have a dispute over terms and conditions, or you disagree with something, you have some level of dispute, then typically that is a civil matter. So say you sign up for something, people didn't honour it, then you would take them to court. You don't get a criminal prosecution out of that. Now, I phoned up the court because I was quite interested to get a transcript of the case, because what you see on social media nowadays is very rarely the truth. I know that's shocking, but that is the case. So I thought if I can get hold of a transcript, I can actually see what the detail is and exactly what has happened. But I couldn't get hold of a transcript, so I phoned a barrister friend of mine and said to him, what's your view on this? Can I get hold of this information? And he basically said to me, because it's a Crown case, there will be no particular judgment. The judge will not summarise it. A jury will make the decision. The judge will summarise the prosecution and the defence case, and then instruct the jury about the law and get them to make a decision around that. So he goes, you won't get a judgment, and you won't get a decision on why the jury found this particular guy guilty, and you probably won't get a transcript either, because you can request one as the defendant or prosecution, but it's unlikely that the third party will be able to get hold of information about this case. So that left a lot of things wide open, and it's very difficult to interpret specifically what happened. However, more information sort of became available, which sort of fleshed out a few more things and made a few things a little bit clearer. So I've seen a lot of stuff floating around in terms of what did or didn't happen and how and why and stuff like that. But ultimately, there is no transcript that exists and nobody has seen it. The only way that you would know what had happened is if you're actually in the court itself and making notes. And to my knowledge, nobody was, apart from the prosecution and the defence. And you look at a couple of different articles that have been floating out. There are loads, basically. But there were two that were written by a magazine and a journalist in particular, and this journalist must have been able to speak to somebody, I'm assuming the defence, because they were able to lay out in a little bit more detail exactly what happened. Now, I've included the link for you to read, because it's important that you read what he basically said, because again, there's a little bit of conjecture in here. Nobody wants to be in contempt of court. Everybody should be saying allegedly and all of these things, and my understanding is that this is going to appeal. I don't know on what basis the appeal is being made, or whether it's even been granted, but fundamentally speaking, you have to read everything sort of second hand, and you can't say that one thing is a fact or another. But it does look like this follow-up article that this journalist did actually gives a bit more detail behind the case. So let me summarise that for you. So let's dig around underneath this and learn a little bit more about exactly what happened here, rather than what you see splashed across social media and so on, and the general thrust of the discussion. The interesting thing is when you look at the sentencing, it's for false representation, fraud by false representation against Bet365 and Santander. We'll discuss both of these in a second. But it would be a surprise if you could get a criminal prosecution for opening an account in your friend's name and doing something for him under his instruction. That just doesn't make any sense. Technically, you could break terms and conditions, but like I said, that's a civil matter, not a criminal matter. But when we look at the detail that the journalist got on this particular case, I'm guessing he spoke to somebody that was involved with the case, because there is no transcript and there was nobody at the court by the sound of it. So I'm guessing he spoke to one of those two parties, or maybe, maybe the defence or something. I don't know. Complete speculation there. You begin to get a picture of exactly what happened and how it ended up in court, because Jon Howard was active between 2018 and 2010. He was active for 8 years doing this, and all of this unfolded long after that had occurred. So you would have thought if there was an issue before that, that would have been the focus of the case. But it actually turned out that during that period, some Bet365 accounts got limited or restricted. They wouldn't pay out on certain amounts. So Jon Howard decided to launch a court case against Bet365. When Bet365 contacted the account owner that had launched this court case, they went, "What court case are you talking about?" And that was when it was referred to the police. So when you look at this particular case, it's in a Crown court, it's done by the Crown Prosecution Service, and that has to be initiated by the police. There has to be a case to answer. Basically, they need to look at the case, they need to decide, is it a sensible amount? Is it in the public interest? And they'll give it to the CPS, who will decide that. And it's the police's role then to gather evidence. So they turned up at his house, they found loads of SIM cards, 1,000 or so accounts, and they basically referred it to the CPS. But the interesting thing is, because of this court case, that sort of muddies the water, because you can't say specifically it was due to a false representation against Bet365 due to the multi-accounting. It could have been related to the court case. The simple fact is we don't specifically know, because we don't have a transcript here. It's complete speculation. Have a read of the article, see if you can interpret specifically what it was for. But basically, when he represented or launched the court case under somebody else's name, that was when it got referred to the police, and they decided that they should look into it further, and that's when it all sort of blew up, basically, at that particular point. It was nothing to do with what had happened before. But also, it turns out that what he did was he took an income from this, which he then had an arrangement with somebody else that basically represented that as wages, and then he used those wages to basically get a mortgage. So that was where the false representation came in with Santander. So it's a little bit more nuanced, as it always is, than you would typically expect from all of the headlines that you have seen. It was basically going in on the basis of, this guy has been jailed for trying to get loads of bonuses on opening new accounts, but not really, if you actually read into the detail of it. If by some reason we eventually get the transcript and it turns out that they did prosecute him for false representation for opening multiple accounts, that would be a first, because they would have successfully got a criminal prosecution for basically doing a bit of match betting, really, which would be a big surprise. Now, because we don't have the detail of the case, all we can do is look at what has been presented and assume that it's really more to do with misrepresenting a court case and also the mortgage side of things. But it's notable that he wasn't prosecuted for money laundering, which also sort of steers it slightly away from the multi-accounting side of things. But again, we have to use a little bit of interpretation here, because there is no specific detail and there's no specific comment, apart from what we can see from this journalist, around exactly how the case came to be. But certainly it's a lot more nuanced than you would expect from some of the headlines, and it also seems to be a little bit deeper. I have been given information about other alleged cases similar to this one, but nobody's given me any information about which court it is in, because if I'm given advance warning of a case that is due to be held, I can actually turn up there and listen in and understand exactly what was going on at that particular court. But unfortunately, on this particular occasion, it doesn't seem like there was anybody from the public or any other representation at this particular case. So all we have to go on is what this journalist has got out of his investigation, which has probably come from somebody that was very familiar with the case, i.e. actually involved within the case itself. But yeah, not quite as simple as it seems when you first see the headlines. And if it were a false representation because of the multi-accounting, that is a radical departure from what you would typically expect as well. So it doesn't feel to me as though that could be the case. and of course we don't specifically know. If you want to understand the detail and how I've summarised it here, have a read of the document yourself, see if you interpret it the same way as me. Typically that is how I look at this and understand exactly what has gone on here, and also the difference in terms of the way that the case was brought and why it occurred sort of the best part of 5 years after he had actually stopped doing it as well. Anyhow, I hope that that video is informative for you.